Jack moved through the broken metal walls of the outpost quietly, listening for any sound that did not belong to him as every step made a soft crunch in the gray dust and old leaves. His heart beating fast because he knew this part of the world was full of danger and silence, but today there was something different in the air. Something sharp that cut through his thoughts like a knife as he looked over his shoulder every few seconds. He almost missed the tiny movement near the pile of smashed crates. A flash of pale fur vanishing into the shadow, and he froze, breath held tight in his chest, thinking for a moment it might be a trick of his tired eyes, or maybe a shadow cast by the broken sunlight that slipped through the cracks. But then he heard a small whimper, thin and weak like a whisper from a creature too tired to cry. Jack bent down, moving slowly so he would not scare whatever was hiding, and he saw her. A tiny alien cub crouched low, her ribs showing, her fur covered in dust and tangled weeds, her golden eyes wide with fear and hunger. The kind of hunger that makes creatures do desperate things. And he remembered what it felt like to be that hungry, to wish for anything. Even a crumb, when your stomach burned and your body shook. He reached into his old jacket and pulled out the last bit of his food. A small pack of dried protein cubes that he had saved for emergencies. And he slid one across the ground toward the cub, careful not to make any sudden movements. Hoping she would understand he meant no harm, his hands shaking a little with cold. And worried the cub hesitated, her body trembling as she stared at the food, then at Jack, then back at the food again, her nose twitching, and she sniffed the air. The smell of the protein making her whimper louder, the sound almost too much for Jack to hear because he felt like he was looking at something that should not be suffering. Something that was too young for pain. Slowly, the cub crawled forward. Her belly pressed to the ground, and she grabbed the food with both tiny paws, stuffing it in her mouth so fast Jack wondered if she thought it would vanish before she could eat it, her sharp teeth tearing at the cube as crumbs fell on the ground, her eyes darting everywhere as if she expected someone to come and take her food. Jack stayed very still, watching the way she ate, the way she shook with every bite, and he realized he was holding his own breath. Afraid to move or speak or even blink because he did not want to frighten her away, he felt something soft and heavy in his chest. A kind of ache he could not explain. Maybe it was just loneliness, or maybe it was the way the cub's eyes met his for a second, so full of hope and fear at the same time. He wanted to say something to her, to promise she was safe, but the words would not come. And maybe words did not matter here. Maybe only actions could cross the distance between human and alien, between fear and trust. So he just nodded, a small motion that seemed to make the cub relax a little, her ears flicking as she chewed. Suddenly, the wind changed, bringing a new scent, sharp and wild and full of warning. And the cub stiffened, her head snapping up, her ears flattening as she looked over Jack's shoulder, her body low and tense like a spring about to snap. And Jack felt the hair on his neck rise as he realized they were not alone. He turned slowly, every muscle tight, and stared into the darkness beyond the trees. But he could see nothing. It's only the thick shadows and the feeling that something huge was watching him. Something patient and dangerous. And for a moment, he wanted to run, too. Grab the cub and dash back inside the outpost. But he knew he would never be fast enough. The cub pressed against his leg, her tiny body shivering, and Jack dropped his hand to her back, not knowing if she would bolt or bite, but she stayed, her small frame trembling as she stared into the night, and Jack whispered that it was going to be all right, even though he was not sure if he was telling her or himself. A low growl rolled through the air, deep and rumbling, making the ground seem to shake. And Jack's heart slammed in his chest as he realized he had just made a promise he might not be able to keep. The kind of promise that could get him killed or worse somewhere out there. In the deep shadow, something was waiting, and Jack knew. The night had only just begun. Jack stood frozen beside the tiny alien cub, the wind brushing through the trees like a whisper of danger. The growl from the darkness still echoing in his ears, deep and slow, like a warning meant for those who had stepped too far where they did not belong. His hand rested gently on the cub's back, and she pressed against his leg tighter, as if trying to hide her whole body behind him. The forest seemed alive now, not just with trees and wind, but with breath, with something massive moving between the trunks, unseen yet powerful. And Jack felt his heart thudding like a drum inside his chest, each beat louder than the last. His eyes scanned the shadows again and again, but saw nothing except the thick gloom and a strange shimmer near the ground where the growl had come from. Then the cub made a sound Jack had never heard before, a high-pitched chirp like a cry and a call at the same time, her small mouth open wide, her voice trembling with both fear and something else. Something like need, and from the darkness came a shift. Like the forest exhaled and something stepped forward from the trees. At first, Jack could not understand what he was seeing. A shape too large to be the cub's sibling, moving with a grace that didn't match its size. Powerful legs padded forward. Silently, claws sinking into the soft earth, glowing stripes slowly appearing across a strong feline form. And then golden eyes, like burning coals, stared at him through the dark. The alien tigress was magnificent and terrifying. Her body tall and strong with smooth fur that rippled in colors Jack had never seen on Earth, shades of silver and violet and shadow, each stripe glowing gently in the moonlight. Her fangs were long but not bared, her ears up but not flat, her gaze fixed on Jack with an unreadable emotion, as if she was studying him like prey or puzzle, or maybe even something more. Jack felt rooted to the ground. The cub now behind him completely, peeking out from between his legs and making tiny chirps again, as if asking her mother not to hurt him. As if trying to say this human was not an enemy, but the tigress took one slow step forward, her muscles rippling beneath her striped coat, her massive body silent and smooth like flowing water. Jack lifted both hands slowly, palms open, showing her he had no weapon. His voice stuck in his throat as his breath shook, but inside he told himself to stay calm, to not run, because running would make him prey, and prey never survived when hunters had eyes like that. He wanted to speak, to say he meant no harm, but the moment was too thick with tension, and so he stood still. The tigress stopped a few feet away, close enough for Jack to see the rise and fall of her chest, the scars across her shoulder, and the way her tail curled behind her with a gentle flick. She looked down at the cub, who chirped again and stepped forward cautiously, rubbing her small body against the tigress's front leg with affection and trust. Jack saw something shift in the tigress's eyes then, something softer, maybe recognition or curiosity, maybe surprise that her cub was safe and even fed, and she bent her head low to sniff the ground where the protein crumbs still lay scattered, her nostrils flaring as she picked up the scent of the food Jack had given. Her head turning back toward him with a new look. Jack did not flinch as she leaned closer, her massive face now only inches from his, her warm breath brushing his skin. With each slow exhale, her golden eyes scanning his soul, it seemed. And then she huffed softly, a low sound that made Jack's legs almost give out. Not because of fear now, but because something ancient and powerful had just accepted his presence. She stepped back, her tail flicking once more, and then she lay down right there in front of him, her large body curling around the cub protectively, her gaze never fully leaving Jack, as if saying, "This is your test, human. Stay if you dare, leave if you fear." And Jack slowly lowered himself to the ground as well. Crossing his legs and sitting a few feet away, the cub snuggled into her mother's side and glanced at Jack with sleepy eyes, yawning once before curling up, and Jack felt something tighten in his throat, a feeling he could not name, a strange mix of awe and purpose, because something told him this moment was only the beginning. The fire inside him burned softly now, not from panic, but from the sense that his life had changed tonight, that this encounter would lead him somewhere he had never expected to go, into a world where trust was earned by the heart, not the species. And Jack stayed still as the tigress's eyes finally blinked slowly in what almost looked like a nod. The stars above them shimmered silently, and the night grew quiet again. But Jack knew deep down that he had stepped into something far greater than just a forest or a planet or a mystery. He had stepped into a story not written by man, but by fate. Jack sat still as a rock with the soft light of early morning sneaking between the branches above his head. The alien tigress curled beside her cub not far from him, her breathing steady and deep, as if the night had finally granted her some peace. After days of struggle and alertness, but Jack could not rest even with the quiet air around him because questions buzzed in his head. Like wild bees, and none of them had answers, he watched as the cub yawned wide and rolled against her mother's side, nuzzling into her thick, glowing fur, and for a moment, Jack thought he saw something he never imagined. He would find on an alien world a scene so soft and familiar it reminded him of the farm dogs and their pups back home in the human colonies. Far across the stars, the tigress opened one eye slowly and looked straight at him, her gaze calm but alert, her tail twitching slightly behind her, as if to remind him that she had not forgotten who and what he was, a stranger, a human, and potentially a threat. But she did not growl this time, and Jack took that as a signal that he was allowed to stay, at least for now. He shifted slowly, reaching for his pack, which was now almost empty, and pulled out the last protein bar he had, saving it for emergencies. But realizing now that this was an emergency of a different kind, the kind where trust needed to be built, or both he and these creatures might not survive what came next. Tearing a piece of the bar, he gently tossed it halfway between them, not too close to make her nervous, and not too far to seem like he was teasing her. The cub blinked and sniffed but did not move, yet instead, it was the tigress who stretched slowly, her massive paws digging into the dirt as she rose with elegance and silent strength. She stepped toward the food, her eyes flicking to Jack every second, her head low, her shoulders rippling with quiet power, and Jack felt a rush of heat crawl up his spine, not from fear now, but from awe, from the realization that this creature, this alien tigress, was more than just muscle and instinct. She was smart, aware, and something in her was watching him deeply, as if reading the lines of his soul. She reached the food, sniffed it again, and this time she took it in her jaws carefully, chewing once before swallowing. Her ears perked slightly, and then she sat down, her gaze locked on Jack, and he felt it again, that unspoken understanding, that wordless moment where two beings from different worlds made a silent pact to not hurt each other. But just as he felt a flicker of calm, something changed. A crack echoed through the forest like a snapped branch, or maybe a boot on dry wood, and the tigress's head snapped up, ear-sharp tail stiff, her golden eyes narrowing toward the trees behind Jack, where he could now hear it, to the soft but clear sound of movement, something or someone coming closer. Jack turned slowly, standing halfway and looking into the woods, heart-pounding thoughts racing. If it was another predator, he was outmatched. If it was a human scout team, they might fire before asking questions. And if it was something else entirely, he had no way to guess what it might bring. The tigress stood beside him now, her shoulder brushing his arm, warm and strong, the cub hiding behind her again, and Jack realized they were no longer enemies. They were standing side by side, facing whatever came together, and that thought gave him a strange calmness inside, the kind that only comes when you know you are not alone anymore. Out of the trees came a shadow, not large like the tigress, but tall and thin, moving with a different kind of grace, a different rhythm. The shape stepped forward, and Jack saw it clearly now, a new alien one he had never seen before, with Gray skin, long arms, and eyes like silver mirrors, reflecting everything and nothing at once. It held no weapon, but its presence felt heavy, its stare piercing. Jack felt the tigress tense beside him, her fur rising slightly, a low growl vibrating in her throat, and Jack held out his hand toward her, a gentle gesture to stay calm, to wait, because he could feel that this new being was not here to fight, at least, not yet. Ka. Alien raised its hand slowly in return, palm-open fingers, long and webbed. Its voice came not from its mouth, but inside Jack's head. A cool, smooth sound that said, "We see you, human, we see what you have done. We did not expect this, we came to take the cub back, but now things are not as simple." Jack did not know what to say, his mouth dry, his thoughts scattered, but the tigress took a step forward, standing tall between Jack and the new alien, her body shielding both her child and the human, and the message in her stance was clear: "This one is under my protection now, and none shall take him unless they go through me." The alien tilted its head slightly, those silver eyes watching in silence for a long, breathless moment before it slowly stepped back, fading into the trees like smoke, leaving behind only questions and a warning in the air that more was coming. The air felt thicker now, heavier, like the sky was pressing down on the forest, and Jack stood still as the silver-eyed alien faded into the trees, its words still ringing inside his mind like a bell that would not stop echoing. "We see what you have done," and nothing felt the same after that, because Jack knew this was no longer about feeding a starving cub. It had become something deeper, something that others were watching from afar. The tigress still stood tall in front of him, her wide shoulders stiff, her golden eyes locked on the place where the alien had disappeared, the cub pressed against her leg, her tiny body shaking, but not from fear. This time it felt more like confusion, as if the child sensed something in the air that even Jack could not name. He lowered himself slowly to the ground, his knees sinking into the soft earth, and he looked at the tigress, waiting for her to move, to speak with her body again, because she had never used words, but Jack had begun to understand her language, the way her tail curved, the flick of her ears, the quiet huff that meant danger or calm or trust, and he knew what she was saying. "Now this is not over." The cub crept toward Jack again, her small paws silent on the ground, her eyes wide and uncertain, and she tucked herself into his side like she had done before when she needed warmth or comfort, and Jack wrapped his arm around her carefully, not to hurt her, but just enough to make her feel safe, her fur soft like woven silk, and her heart beat fast like a drum in a storm. A sound came from above, not from the trees, but from the sky. A low hum, deep and pulsing like a machine waking up, and Jack looked up through the canopy and saw faint lights moving between the clouds, small blinking trails that danced in slow patterns and vanished again. He knew what they were: observation drones, silent watchers from orbit, sent to record everything and report back to someone or something much higher up in the food chain. He felt exposed now, like he had been placed on a stage, and every move he made was being judged, not just by the tigress or her cub, or even the silver-eyed stranger, but by powers far away who had not yet revealed their face or their intent. And he wondered what they wanted with a man, a cub, and a tigress who had simply chosen not to fight. The tigress turned to him now, her gaze softer than before, not relaxed, but no longer full of fire, and she walked past him, brushing against his side, her body warm and steady, and she looked back once, her eyes meeting his in a way that asked a silent question: "Will you follow?" Jack nodded slowly, rising to his feet, and the cub followed without needing to be told. The three of them moving together now through the forest, deeper into shadows where the air felt cooler and the wind whispered things Jack could not understand, but he trusted the tigress, her pace, calm and sure, like she had a destination in mind. They walked for what felt like hours until the trees thinned and opened into a valley hidden between two rocky ridges, and in the center of the valley stood something ancient, a stone circle half buried in vines and moss, glowing faintly with markings that pulsed like heartbeat, and the tigress approached it with reverence, lowering her head as if greeting an old friend. Jack stood at the edge of the circle, unsure if he should step forward, but the cub ran ahead, chirping softly and jumping between the stones like she knew this place. And then the tigress looked at him again, and this time there was no question in her eyes, only invitation and trust. And Jack stepped forward, feeling a strange warmth pass through him as his foot crossed the boundary. Inside the circle, the world felt different. The wind was quieter, the ground firmer, and the light above more golden, like the sun itself had decided to focus only on this place. And Jack knelt beside the stones, running his fingers across the strange symbols, not understanding their meaning, but feeling something stir in his chest, something old and powerful. The tigress lay beside him, her body stretched out and relaxed, her cub nestled into her side again, and Jack sat close, watching the markings glow brighter as the sky darkened above the stars, blinking into life one by one like eyes watching their small gathering in silence. Suddenly, the markings pulsed brighter, and the ground beneath them hummed softly. A voice filled the air, not from the sky or the trees or the mind, but from the stones themselves, and it spoke not in language, but in feeling, in waves of emotion and memory that washed over Jack like water in a storm. He saw flashes in his mind, images of the tigress, her kind, running through the stars, living with honor, and hunted by shadows. He saw the cub born into war and fear and hunger, and then he saw himself, not as a man, but as a choice, a turning point, a question written in the stars. Will he protect or destroy? The vision faded, and Jack gasped, his hands shaking, the tigress staring at him now with knowing eyes, and the cub curled tighter into his side, as if she, too, had. And Jack knew now this was not just a bond or a friendship, this was destiny. Jack sat in the center of the glowing stone circle with his heartbeat echoing louder than the quiet around him. The memory of the vision still burned in his chest like a living flame, every image replaying again and again, as if trying to remind him that nothing would ever be the same. His hands were trembling, not from fear, but from weight, the weight of knowing he had become part of something ancient, something bigger than war or survival. The tigress remained beside him, still and calm like a guardian made of starlight, her cub breathing softly against her side, as if unaware of the power that had just swept through them all. But Jack knew she had felt it, too, because her eyes watched him now, not with the sharp gaze of a hunter, but with the soft, knowing look of someone who had just seen a secret revealed and accepted it. Above them, the sky shifted, the stars brighter than before, as if the circle below had connected to something above, and Jack looked up into the night sky, feeling small and yet connected, feeling like a thread in a great web that stretched across planets and moons and hearts, not bound by species, but by choice. Then the silence broke, not with sound, but with motion, as shapes moved along the ridge above the valley, long and lean like shadows sliding across the stone. Their movements too smooth, too fast, to be anything natural, and Jack rose quickly, his eyes tracking them, his body tense because he could feel the danger they brought, not just for him, but for the tigress and her cub. The tigress was already on her feet, her body low and ready, her muscles coiled like springs, her tail sweeping behind her with slow, deliberate motion. The cub crouched low behind her, and Jack stood between them and the ridge's arms, wide, not to fight, but to stand guard, because the choice had already been made inside his heart. The shapes came closer, now revealing themselves in flashes of silver and black, their eyes cold and glassy, their limbs sharp like walking weapons. And Jack knew who they were, not from memory, but from the feeling deep inside. They were the ones from the vision, the ones who hunted the tigress's kind, the ones who had no soul, only mission. They surrounded the circle in perfect silence, their weapons drawn not of metal but of energy, their tips glowing with pale blue light, and they stood still, watching, waiting for a signal or a moment or a reason. And Jack stepped forward, his hands raised, his voice strong, though cracked by dust and fear. "This is a sacred place." He said, his tone not begging, but commanding. They will not be harmed. Not here. The lead figure tilted its head, almost curious. And then the voice came not through air, but through Jack's mind, like the silver-eyed alien. Before, but colder, flatter like ice across stone. "This one does not understand it," said. "This world does not belong to him. This bond is forbidden. This life is not." His to defend Jack took another step closer, standing at the edge of the circle, the glowing lines pulsing beneath his feet, and he felt the warmth rise through him again like before, and he knew what to do. He placed his palm flat against the central stone, the largest one, and the stone answered with light bursting outward like fire across the ground. The invaders stepped back, shielding their eyes, but not retreating, and Jack felt the energy flow through his arm into his chest, filling him with heat and vision and strength. The voice returned louder. Now this bond was chosen. The trial accepted. The guardian, named the Tigress, growled, now not out of fear, but out of rage. Her body moving to stand beside Jack, her shoulders touching his side. As her cub stayed low behind them, and together they faced the line of machines and metal and silence with nothing but courage and unity. Ground beneath them trembled, the markings glowing brighter, the air thick with power, and Jack felt it coming. Not an army, not a weapon, but a presence. Something ancient waking, something deep beneath the soil of this forgotten place. The invaders shifted, uncertain, their perfect lines, broken their weapons, twitching their eyes, scanning for what they could not understand, and the ground cracked wide, light pouring through like golden rivers, and the stone circle rose slightly, floating above the earth, as if the planet itself had lifted it in defense. From below came light in the shape of wings, massive and soft and endless. They rose around Jack and the Tigress, not touching, but wrapping them in a dome of safety. The machines fired beams of cold light that vanished against the glow, as if swallowed by truth itself. Then came a sound, the first real sound the valley had heard since it was born, a low hum that grew into a roar, that became a song not made by mouth or machine, but by the heart of the planet, and the fear of the invaders broke like glass. They retreated slowly at first, then faster, vanishing into the trees and beyond the ridge, leaving behind only the silence and the light and the breathless weight of what had just happened. Jack fell to his knees. His strength spent, his mind filled with fire and memory. The Tigress beside him, lowering herself slowly, her body touching his as if to say, "We are still her." And the cub climbed into his lap, curling close, and for the first time Jack held her fully, not as a stranger or a protector, but as something more, as something chosen. Jack lay on the soft earth inside the stone circle with the cub asleep in his arms. Her small body, warm and light, like a whisper, the Tigress beside him, breathing slow and steady, her golden eyes half closed, but still alert, as if watching both the stars above and the soil below, where the energy had come from, like a great heart of the world, resting again after defending them. The stars above shimmered in new colors, like they had seen the light rise and approved. The sky stretched wide and endless above the valley, and Jack felt something shift deep inside his chest. Not pain, not fear, something gentle and vast, like belonging, like home, like purpose, that had waited in silence until he was ready to hear it. His hands were still glowing faintly from the light that had burst through him earlier, his fingers tingling with power that did not feel like his own, but no longer felt strange, either like a song he had forgotten but once knew by heart, and now remembered note by note. With every quiet breath, the Tigress lifted her head, just slightly, her ears twitching at a sound far off, not threatening, but different, and Jack listened to hearing the soft rustle of leaves in rhythm, not with wind, but with steps, careful steps, many steps, not of metal, not of machines, but of others, like her, soft and slow, approaching without fear. Shapes began to emerge from the trees. tall and graceful with eyes that glowed like amber and fur that shimmered like starlight, some smaller, some larger, all moving with grace and strength. And Jack realized they were not just another group. They were her kind, the rest of the tribe, the pride. The family she had once lost or left behind, and now they had come. They entered the circle, slowly, heads bowed. Slightly not in fear, but in respect, and the tigress stood to greet them, her cub chirping once and running toward one of the elders, who knelt low to nuzzle the child with affection and relief and something like pride, and Jack watched as one by one they came to him, not close, but near enough to show they saw him not just as a visitor, but as something more. The eldest among them stepped forward, fur silver with age and eyes deep as oceans. His voice came not through sound, but feeling, a quiet pulse that entered Jack's chest like a heartbeat long forgotten, and he said, "You were not born of this world, but you have heard its call. You were not shaped by our laws, but you have passed their test, and now you carry the flame that guards us." Jack bowed his head, unsure of what words to offer, and felt the tigress step beside him again, her shoulder brushing his, as if to say, "Speak." Not with mouth, but with presence, and he looked into the eyes of the elder and felt himself nod, once firm and honest in truth. Elder turned and raised his arms, and the tribe circled close, not with weapons, not with armor, but with light, each of them glowing with soft colors that matched the markings on the stones, and together they formed a circle around Jack, and the tigress and the cub, and the earth began to hum again, not loud, not wild, but soft, like a lullaby being sung to the stars. The circle pulsed with golden rings of warmth, spreading outward into the forest and sky, and something ancient responded. Not a beast, not a god, but a memory, a force that had waited buried in this place for generations, and now stirred once more. As if pleased by what had happened, pleased that trust had bloomed where fear once grew. Jack felt tears rise to his eyes, not from sadness, but from joy, from awe, from the strange beauty of it all, the kind that fills a man's soul with more than he can carry. And he reached down and lifted the cub into his arms again, feeling her heartbeat against his chest, steady and strong. The tigress nuzzled the cub gently, then turned her gaze to Jack, and in that gaze he saw things no language could hold: sorrow and strength, love and fire, pain and healing, all wrapped in one. And he nodded again, not because he understood everything, but because he accepted it, and that was enough. The tribe began to chant, now low and deep, and the earth around them bloomed with faint light, the trees shimmering, the sky glowing brighter, as if the planet itself had begun to sing in return. And Jack stood among them, not as an outsider, not as a human lost in alien lands, but as something else, something new, a bridge, a bond, a guardian of more than just a cub, more than just a tigress. He had become a guardian of a legacy, a protector of a truth that stretched across stars and into hearts. And as the chant rose and the forest danced with golden leaves, the cub in his arms looked up at him with eyes wide and glowing, and gave a small, soft chirp that sounded like hope itself. The golden chant still echoed through the valley, the song of light still flowing between trees and stones and stars. But something inside Jack had gone quiet, not empty, but still, like a pond after rain, smooth and deep, and reflecting everything he had seen and felt since the moment he gave food to a starving cub, since the moment he stepped into a story that was never written by men. The tribe had finished their circle and now stood in silence, watching him, watching the tigress, watching the cub, as if waiting for a signal, for something final, something that would close one chapter and open another. And Jack stood tall, not because he felt powerful, but because he knew he could not turn back, because the person who had walked into this forest was not the one standing in it now. The cub clung to his side, her small paw curled around his wrist, her head pressed against his ribs, and the tigress stood behind him, her gaze fixed on the sky, her ears still like statues carved from starlight. And Jack followed her eyes upward as the first red light appeared above the ridge, moving fast and low. Not a drone, not a scout, but a ship. It's a kind of ship that brought fire, not hope, the kind that came not to ask, but to take, and Jack felt a cold wave pass through him as he realized the enemy had returned not as shadows or whispers, but with steel and command and hunger for control. They were not here for peace. They were here to erase what they had failed to destroy before the elders moved fast their bodies, glowing their markings, burning brighter with each heartbeat, and the circle of protection rose again, pulsing with energy that reached into the clouds, trying to shield the valley from what was falling. But Jack knew it would not be enough. Not this time, not against machines that had no soul and no limit. He looked at the tigress, and she looked back, her golden eyes soft and firm, and full of decision, and he understood her without needing words. She would fight. She would die if she had to, but she would never let the cub be taken, and Jack felt the same. Not because of duty, not because of pride, but because of love, a kind of love that had no name, but was real and strong and eternal. He turned to the cub, knelt before her, placed his forehead gently against hers, and whispered, "You will not be alone. You are never alone." And he placed something small in her paw, not a weapon, not a gift, just a piece of himself, a token of promise made with hands and heart, and silenced the light from the sky. Grew stronger now, the ship almost above the tree's engines, roaring like demons with wings, and Jack rose to face it, his body still glowing from the circle, his hands steady, his breath slow. The tigress beside him, now her tail wrapping around his ankle, her presence not behind him, not in front of him, but with him. Then the sky cracked open, and fire poured down, and everything happened at once, the tribe raising their arms, the stones bursting with light, the cub screaming, the ship firing, the ground splitting, the trees bending, and in the center of it all, Jack lifted both hands, not in defense, not in surrender, but in offering. He closed his eyes and let the light within him rise. Let it speak. Let it burn, not with heat, but with truth. And the fire stopped, not because the ship missed, not because the blast failed, but because something older than fire caught it, something shaped like love, like trust, like the bond of one man, one cub, one tigress standing together without fear. The explosion never touched them, the ship never landed, the valley never burned. And when the silence returned, it came like dawn, soft and clean and full of breath. The ship vanished, not destroyed, but turned away, as if it had seen something inside the light that made it down itself. The tribe lowered their arms, the stones dimmed, the trees stood tall again, and Jack fell to his knees, the energy gone, his strength spent, but his spirit glowing, and the tigress knelt beside him, nudging him gently, lifting him with her shoulder, as if to say, "You are still here, you did not fall though." Cub ran to him, her eyes wide, her voice a chirp that trembled like laughter, and Jack held her close, his arms wrapping around her tiny frame, and he looked up at the stars, which now blinked slowly, as if nodding in approval. The elders gathered around, their eyes full of wonder, not for the enemy turned away, but for the bond that had grown in the fire, for the human who had fed a cub and found a family, for the light that had chosen not a warrior, not a king, but a man with an open hand and a brave heart. The tigress stood tall again, and so did Jack, the cub between them, her paws in both their hands, and the tribe sang again, this time not in warning or protection, but in celebration, a song for the future, a song for peace. And Jack knew he would not leave this place, because this was home now, not the land, not the sky, but the hearts that beat beside his, the trust that had no need for words, the love that crossed every